This is lesson number 5 in Bible history number 1. At the end of our last lesson, we quickly surveyed all of Noah's life. We studied him up to the flood pretty accurately, or pretty in detail. Then we just scoped. We did that on purpose so that we could see his life unto the end. But now let's go back and pick up where the ark rests on the earth, and Noah begins again the life. 8, beginning with verse 15 says, Genesis 8, beginning with verse 15. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds and the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth, be fruitful, and increase in number upon it." So Noah came out, together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves upon the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another. There is the magnificent emergence, the momentous emergence, as Noah, the righteous seed, and all of the innocent animals of the world come out again to repopulate the world. There are some people that believe that this was only a local flood. But if that were true, there'd be no reason for the ark. They could just go up to the mountain or go to another part of the world and wait for the flood to cease. This was a worldwide flood, a destruction of all the wicked, and a brand new start. Now Noah's out of the ark. Let's watch his character and see the first thing that he did. Wouldn't that indicate the character of a man, the first thing he did? It's in verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. Then the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man. Even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood, never again will I destroy all living creatures as I've done." There have been a lot of local floods, so this wasn't a local flood, because God says, "I'll never again do this. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." And so God is satisfied with the fact that man will remember this momentous judgment, and that he will not have to do that again. There's God's divine intention. He never intends to destroy the world by flood again. In chapter 9, God announces a new era, a new eon of life. It says, "Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful." Sounds just like what he said to Adam. "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the earth." Until that time, man had been friends with the animals, and the animals friends with him. "Then the fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves upon the ground, upon all the fish of the sea. They're given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything." Up until that time, man had been vegetarian. He'd only eaten the green things. And now God gives him the animals to eat also, but with a prohibition. God, when he grants the maximum, always forbids the minimum. He says, "But you must not eat meat that has its life blood in it. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each man too. I will demand an accounting for the life of his fellow man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number and multiply upon the face of the earth and increase upon it." Notice the covenant here. Not the covenant, but the era that starts here. They now are flesh eaters. Up until that time, like all the animals, they'd been simply eaters of vegetation. Now they also can eat the animals, but not the blood. For the life is in the blood. Notice also that in regard to mankind, it's different. You can shed animals' blood and eat the meat, but whoever sheds man's blood, by man will his blood be shed. That starts as a law, capital punishment. I want you to remember that capital punishment is of God, and it was an order of God as soon as the ark had rested on sinless soil. Now watch, if you will, the covenant that is now made, starting in verse 8. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth, I will establish my covenant with you. Here it is. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. Again, that makes the flood universal and not just a local flood, because there have been lots of local floods. And God says we're never going to do this again. So God makes a covenant. I will be with you. I will never again destroy all living creatures. Now watch the sign of the covenant, beginning in verse 12. And God said. I told you that would get redundant. God said, God said, God said. Then God said, this is the sign of the covenant I'm making between you, me and you, and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I've set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the sky, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I've established between me and all life on the earth. Just a few days ago, I saw a rainbow. When I saw that rainbow, I thought of this passage. It says simply that God will never again bring the kind of flood he brought in Noah's day. It was a worldwide flood. Noah and 7 human beings were all the human beings in all the earth that escaped the judgment of the flood. 2 of every kind of animal was with them on the ark, and 7 of every clean kind of animal. And Peter makes reference to this in 1 Peter 3 and says, as the water washed the earth clean from its sin, so baptism saves us. So baptism washes us clean from sin. So when I saw the rainbow, I thought of Noah's flood, I thought of Jesus' death, and I thought of my salvation. But I'm sorry to say, evil is persistent. If we could stop in verse 17, it's a brand new place, and the people are living in a sinless environment. But that can't last long. Verse 18, chapter 9. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the 3 sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. Every person comes from Shem, Ham, or Japheth. Noah, a man of the soil. Boy, there's something just real attractive about farmers. A man of the soil proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his 2 brothers outside. Now, it doesn't state it here. Later they say laughed. And so he's laughing at his father's drunken nakedness. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked backwards and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father's nakedness. They not only won't laugh at his nakedness, they won't look at him. They're honoring their father even when he's done an unhonorable deed. Even when he's not really worthy of honor at this moment. They're honoring him because he is Father, man of God, walks with God, and righteous, although here in his sin also. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his younger son had done, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." He didn't say cursed be Ham. He goes beyond Ham to Canaan, who will be the father of the Canaanites, who will be the tribes that serve Israel when they enter the promised land. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend the territory of Japheth. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave." I think it's interesting and necessary for you to know that Shem is the father of all the people we call Semitic. The Jews, the Arabs, those kind of people. Ham is the father of those that we call Negroid, those in not necessarily black, but those in Egypt and in that part of the world. Japheth is European. And I don't know where the Asian people came from, probably from a mixture of this. But the world is covered by these three sons. Verse 28 of chapter 9 says, "After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Altogether, Noah lived 950 years, then he died." 350 years he lived beyond the flood. An interesting point, and maybe we'll make this point later on down the line, and maybe even have a chart on it later down the line. But Methuselah lived 243 years into the life, or let me put it the other way around. Adam lived 243 years in the life of Methuselah. If he knew him, he had 243 years to teach Methuselah the story of creation and the fall. Methuselah died the year of the flood. So he had 600 years to teach Noah about the fall. And Noah had 350 years after the flood to teach other people. And if you take Shem, Noah's son, will live into the lifetime of Jacob. They don't really need a written revelation. I mean, word of mouth will get the story told in those days. And that's why there is no written revelation. That's just a point of interest, and maybe we'll have time to discuss that later. But I do learn something I need to learn. That is, even with righteous men, evil couches at the door. Sin is a persistent thing. The devil is still trying to destroy the seed of the woman by destroying this family of Noah. But he's not able to do it. In chapter 10, the whole chapter, you have what I call the table of nations. You have the sons of Japheth and Ham and Shem listed here. And from their sons come all of the nations of the world in ancient times, as far as that's concerned even today. And many of them still wearing the name that they've worn from antiquity. We'll have a chart on the screen here in a bit, and it will show these sons one by one and the nations that came from them. Now, we're not going to read all the way through chapter 10. It's not the most interesting reading until you realize that we're talking about the nations of the world. Japheth had 7 sons. They're mentioned in verses 2 through 5. Those sons are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Teras. Now, I don't know much about Tubal, Meshach, and Teras. The last 3 of those sons, who came from them, probably some European nations. But Gomer is the father of the people we call Celts or Celts, and that's the Franks and the German people. Magog is the father of the Scythian people, who were known for their development of the spear and their use of horses. Madai is the father of the Medes, which along with the Persians will be a worldwide empire near the close of our Old Testament day. And Javan is the father of the Greeks, and everybody came from the Greeks, which would be a lot of the European people. So Japheth is a strong, powerful empire before long, an empire of empires, of all of the people that will inhabit what we will later call Europe. For a while they try to stay together, but we'll study that next time in the Tower of Babel. But they're driven from that because that's not the we'll study it this time, because that is not the will of God. Now, Ham had 4 sons. They're mentioned beginning in about verse 6 and going on to about verse 16 or so. There, he has 4 sons: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Now, he's always said to be the father of Canaan, but he had 3 other sons. Cush is Ethiopia, one of the most powerful nations of the world in ancient times, and some of the most beautiful, stately people that we see today. And Mizraim is, every time you see Egypt in your Old Testament, it's this word Mizraim in the Hebrew. Mizraim is Egypt, and there was a time, 2 or 3 times, that Mizraim, Egypt, ruled the entire world. And Put is Libya, which is all that northern part of Africa, and Canaan is Palestine. That's the only weakling in all of Ham's children. That's why the curse is upon Canaan and not upon Ham. Ethiopia, Egypt, and Libya are never to be seen as cursed people in ancient times. These are kingly, regal, royal, ruling people. So the curse is not upon Ham. It's not upon the Negroid race. It's only upon Canaan, his son. Shem had 5 sons. Each one of them has a nation, biblically, that comes from them. His 5 sons are Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, that's a good name, isn't it? Lud, and Aram. Now, Elam, very easy to see, is the Elamites, one of the powerful ruling people at where the Tigris and Euphrates River come together. You'll know more about that in a minute after we look at some geography. Asher is the father of the Assyrian people, the ruling nation in the 8th century. Arphaxad is the father of the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, another ruling people in the 8th century. And by the way, also the father of the Jews. Lud, because Abraham was a Chaldean. Lud is the father of Lydia, and Aram the father of the Syrians. These are all powerful people in our Old Testament history. So it'd be good if you were to learn that chart. The people were told by God, you remember early in our lesson, that they were to scatter out, that they were multiply and replenish the earth. They didn't do that. They decided that they wanted to stay together. So they started building a rallying point, a big tower whose height nearly reached under the heavens. It's called the Tower of Babel. But their reason for building that tower was to stay together. And God says, if we don't do something about this, we'll not be able to hinder anything they do. See, unity is always powerful. It's not always good. So God confused their tongues so they began to talk to each other in languages that they did not understand. And that's all it takes to scatter. If I'm around people I don't understand, before long I leave. And so the people then did God's will, didn't want to, against their will, they did God's will, and scattered and began to multiply and replenish the earth. Since that's true, we need to take an aside here from our history and study a little geography and see the geography of the Old Testament world. We're going to have a map here that we're going to look at several times. And on this map, we're going to put just 33 facts. If I were teaching this to you personally, I'd have you memorize these 33 facts. I'd have you put them on the map until you could put them on the map in your sleep. Because this is the map that we will study throughout all of our Old Testament study. And I want you to notice several things that we're going to put on this map. First of all, I want you to look at the waters, the bodies of water that go up on the earth. Up in the north and to the east is the Caspian Sea, where Tehran, the capital of Iran, is today. It is the largest body of water completely surrounded by land. It's the largest so-called sea or lake, inland sea, in all the world. Coming down the map, to the south and the east part of that map, is the Persian Gulf, which, you know, is a point of conflict in the world many, many times. And that's where civilization will center, because into that Gulf flow the Tigris and the Euphrates River, which is the cradle of civilization. And then on down the map, and more toward the center, is the Red Sea. And the Red Sea has 2 gulfs. The Gulf of Suez, where today the Suez Canal connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and the Gulf of Aqaba. Across that Gulf, the Gulf of Aqaba, Israel will march on dry land, and the Egyptian army will be destroyed. And on just the other side of the Gulf of Aqaba is Mount Sinai, where God will speak the law. Then the Mediterranean Sea is this large sea in the middle of the map, which is today called the Mediterranean Sea. In the Old Testament, primarily called the Great Sea. Around this, many, many interesting things, Old and New Testament, will be depicted. And then finally, a small but very significant sea is the Dead Sea. At the bottom of the Jordan River, a sea that's 1,292 feet below the level of the sea and has 1,300 foot depth. The bottom of that sea is 2,600 feet below the level of the sea. We'll talk more about that river later, that sea later. Then there's 6 rivers that we want to notice on this map. The first is the Araxes River that's way up north and is the northernmost river and forms the northern border of biblical land. The Tigris River is the river on the east and the north of the Mesopotamian area, and the Euphrates River, its sister, is the one to the west and to the south. Those are the 2 great rivers of the ancient world. So much so that in your Bible, when you read the river capitalized, it will always be the river Euphrates. The Orontes River is up at the northern part of that land extension just before it curves and goes west to form the shore of the Mediterranean in modern Lebanon. It's a river that flows north and then east into the Great Sea, and it'll not be of importance much in the Old Testament, will become very important in the New. The Nile River is down in Egypt, and it's the most unusual river in the world, and we'll study it when we study Egypt. It flows 1,500 miles without a tributary. It has developed such a great force that it'll flow for 1,500 miles into the sea without any tributary at all. We'll study that river later. The Jordan River is the river that flows in what's called the first part of what's called the Great Rift. It starts up at Mount Hermon and Mount Lebanon and runs all the way to the Transvaal in South Africa. Longest rift on earth that there is. This Jordan River we'll study in detail when we begin to study the history of Israel. There are 6 mountains that we'll want to put on this map. Mount Ararat, which is way up in the northern part and again near the Araxes River and forms the northern boundary of Old Testament world. The Caspian Range, which is just south of the Caspian Sea. The Zagros Range, which is on south of that and provides a buffer between Mesopotamia and the rest of the world. The Taurus Range, which is where Saul of Tarsus was born, up on the north shore of the Great Sea. The Lebanon and the anti-Lebanon range, which runs each side of the Jordan River. The Lebanon on the west side and the anti-Lebanon on the east. But of course, the primary thing that we're interested in is countries. Now, I want us to see these countries in 3 different divisions, so to speak. First of all, the countries of the mountain system. Those 3 mountain systems that we talked about, Ararat, Caspian, and Zagros. Up in the Ararat mountain range is the country of Armenia. It won't be too important biblically, although it'll come up now and then. Down in the Caspian range is the country of Media. Very, very important countries. They helped form the Medo-Persian Empire. And down in the Zagros range is the country of Persia, modern-day Iran. And this is one of the most powerful nations of the world on several occasions, so we'll be studying about Persia throughout our study. Where the Tigris and the Euphrates River comes together, we begin the countries between the rivers, the countries of the Mesopotamian area. First of all is Sumer, not important biblically, but the most ancient empire known to man. And then Chaldea, or Babylonia, where Babylon, the city, will be a powerful empire, and where Abraham will be born and come from. Then moving way on up the rivers, we come to Assyria with the capital of Nineveh. And this is also several times a very powerful empire. On the other side, on the eastern side of the Tigris River, is the country of Elam, and the Elamites are a powerful people. All of the area between the rivers is called Mesopotamia, which literally means between the rivers. From that area of Mesopotamia all the way over to Palestine is the Arabian Desert. And so we'll just call that part of the country Arabia. And nobody crosses that desert except the Arabians until Alexander does to defeat the Persian Empire. Now, the countries surrounding the eastern Mediterranean, up on the northern border in present day, or in New Testament day Asia Minor and present day Turkey, is the nation of the Hittites. In the extreme north of that part that comes down the Jordan River is the country of Syria, with its capital Damascus, famous for making steel and iron. Along the coast is Phoenicia and Philistia, or Canaan, or Palestine. There are three countries there. Phoenicia, which is above the hump in the sea, Philistia, which is below the hump in the sea, and Canaan, which is between the river Jordan and the Great Sea. And then all the way down the south, of course, you have Egypt, that is watered by and made fruitful by the Nile. Now, we covered that very quickly because that's why I think geography ought to be covered. But you need to look at that. You need to draw that map, and there's a place on your outline where you can draw that map for yourself and put those 33 places there. Please do that, so that when we talk about these places, we'll know where they are. For geography is important to history. We'll be back to our study of the Bible in our next lesson.